Voluntarily. I didn't wait for anything. I came forward because I knew that there was an investigation underway.
Her testimony helped provide the link to the White House in the first charges filed in the Iran-Contra scandal. We'll talk with her live tonight. Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline.
I came to learn that things were not quite right.
Our guest tonight, Jane McLaughlin, whose former boss, Carl Channell, pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges today and named former White House aide Oliver North as a co-conspirator.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
First, a schedule change. Earlier this evening, Jessica Hahn, who was going to join us later in this program, went briefly to the hospital. She was seen by a doctor, treated, and is now back home. I spoke to her a short time ago, and she'll be joining us on Nightline later this week. Now, tonight's focus. Today, a conservative fundraiser with close ties to the White House pleaded guilty to the first criminal charges in the Iran-Contra scandal. That story was first broken several weeks ago by ABC's Karen Burns, who reported that potential contributors were told that their money would go toward buying weapons and material for the Nicaraguan Contras, and that if they contributed above a certain amount, they would meet personally with President Reagan. Today, that story and other details were confirmed in full. Here's Barry Serafin.
About this time last year, conservative fundraiser Carl Channell was on a roll, openly bragging about his access to the President of the United States.
Well, the President has personally encouraged me tremendously. I've met with him 3 times in the past 3 or 4 weeks, I guess, on this issue.
The issue, aid to the Contras. Today, Channell was in federal court, pleading guilty to a charge of defrauding the government of tax money, using his tax-exempt National Endowment for the Preservation of Liberty to raise more than $2 million for the Contras.
What Mr. Channell admitted that he did was to subvert the proper operations of that tax-exempt organization by soliciting contributions for the purposes of purchasing military aid and other forms of non-humanitarian aid for the Contras, which is clearly a non-tax-exempt purpose.
There's no evidence that President Reagan knew Channell was soliciting money for weapons. But Channell said today that former Reagan aide Oliver North knew about the scheme. He named North as his co-conspirator. The fundraising not only violated tax laws, but may have been a violation of a 2-year congressional ban on military aid to the Contras. That ban is at the root of what happened. Mr. Reagan made no secret of his frustration with Congress's action. Enter Colonel North, who, in the words of the Tower Commission report, moved to fill a void left by the congressional restrictions by setting up a private network to supply weapons to the Contras. Enter Channell with his contributor lists. North met frequently with Channell and his donors. Earlier this year, Jane McLaughlin, a former Channell fundraiser, explained how the system worked.
There was a liaison in Central America who would notify Colonel North as to what the military needs were, or what the non-humanitarian needs were. And Colonel North would then let us know how much money was needed.
It was called the Toys account, but those who worked for Channell knew its real purpose.
I knew the account was for weapons. It wasn't for toys for children. It was toys, meaning guns and ammunition.
The money was funneled through a public relations and consulting firm headed by former Reagan campaign aide Richard Miller, named by Channell today as another co-conspirator. Channell used letters of praise from President Reagan in his fundraising. Again, there's no evidence that Mr. Reagan knew the real purpose of the money. There is, however, a memo in the Tower Commission report from North to his then boss, John Poindexter. I have no idea, he said, what Don Regan does or does not know regarding my private U.S. operation, but the president obviously knows why he's been meeting with several select people to thank them for their support for democracy in Central America. Channell's guilty plea today raises anew the question of who knew what in the White House. Neither North nor Miller, those he named as co-conspirators, has been charged, but Channell is continuing to cooperate with the special prosecutor. And the only question appears to be how far and how high the list of indictments will go. This is Barry Serafin for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll talk with Jane McLaughlin, the former fundraiser for Carl Channell, and the key witness in the case. And we'll talk with Congressman Beryl Anthony of Arkansas, chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which has raised some additional questions about Channel's activities.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ford Motor Company.
Ford Motor Company's new 6-year, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty has a quality all its own. For 6 years in a row, our cars and trucks have had fewer reported problems on average than any other vehicles designed and built in North America.
Not just when they were new, but thousands of miles down the road.
6 years, 60,000 miles.
With a warranty like that and a quality record like ours.
Whose car would you rather be driving?
At Ford, quality is job one.
Let's see, Milano for Charlie, Bordeaux for Terrence, and Gladys. Dark chocolate and pecans of Geneva. Pepperidge Farm distinctive cookies inspire fierce loyalty. Everybody thinks their favorite is the best. They're right. Party's not till tomorrow. Tragic era.
Eating on the run's got you tied in knots. Send the bubbles of Alka-Seltzer to the rescue, because speed is what you need to loosen the grip of your acid indigestion and heartburn with a headache fast. So when your stomach and head have gotten you tied up, help undo it with the bubbles of Alka-Seltzer.
Alka-Seltzer to the rescue.
Try new extra strength Alka-Seltzer. More of what you take Alka-Seltzer for.
You know, there's only a few extras that separate the better from the best.
And that's exactly what we found with our new Radnor home. Like thick plush carpeting from Armstrong.
We selected the color and the style, plus we upgraded to the new Stainmaster.
We spent months looking for a house.
But when we found Radnor, we found a home.
Radnor Homes, what Nashville is moving up to.
Thursday, run away with Robin Leach and see what his lifestyle is like. Plus a potential fire hazard in automatic coffee makers.
Watch 2020.
Thursday.
With us now live in our Washington Bureau is Jane McLaughlin, former fundraiser for Carl Channell, who both testified and provided documents to Iran-Contra investigators, and Congressman Beryl Anthony, chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which yesterday asked the Federal Elections Committee to investigate Channel's fundraising activities. Ms. McLaughlin, help me out a little bit here. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the White House come to Carl Channell and say, we're in deep trouble here, we need money to be raised, or did Channell go to folks at the White House and say, hey, you're in trouble, we can raise the money?
I wish I could tell you, Mr. Koppel. I don't know which came first. I joined the organization in January of 1986, and to the best of my knowledge, a relationship had already been established between Mr. Channell and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North.
Now, when you talk about a relationship, and I'm speaking now specifically about the kind of relationship that is sometimes puffed up a little when people want to raise money. I'm sure there are an awful lot of folk in this town and maybe even in other parts of the country who make a great deal of their relationship with the president when in fact they don't have any, or a relationship with the White House when they don't have any. Was this one legit?
Well, there was clearly a relationship with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Otherwise, I don't think we would have been able to arrange military briefings with him on a moment's notice, or one-on-one briefings between contributors and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North.
Now, what kind of military briefings are you talking about?
Well, for instance, there were two held in the spring of 1986. I know that there were previous briefings held because one of the other fundraisers had shared that information with me back in 1985. We would send out mailgrams inviting potential contributors to a military briefing on the situation in Nicaragua with a high-level national security official, and that a very special project would be undertaken by the group immediately following the briefing, which would be held in the old executive office building.
And what would happen? Folks would respond, and who would brief? That would be, I mean, that high-ranking official would be Colonel North?
Yes. The object behind inviting these people to these briefings, at least this is what I was told as a fundraiser, was to find potential contributors to the Toys Project. They would actually be invited to these military briefings, but the real purpose was to weed out potential contributors to the Toys Project. They would come to Washington and meet with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North in the old Executive Office building, and those briefings really, from his standpoint, consisted of a rallying effort and an opportunity to build rapport with these potential contributors. And then afterwards, there would be a lavish dinner held in the Hay Adams Hotel, and it would give the fundraisers an opportunity to set the stage with these potential contributors to determine whether they were the kinds of highly patriotic Americans who wanted to take direct action with regard to assisting the freedom fighters of Nicaragua.
Now, did you ever participate? I mean, I'm talking now about when it got to the second phase and it went to the Hay Adams. Were you party to that?
Yes, I was.
Now, one of the things that you told Karen Burns many weeks ago when she first did her reports on World News Tonight on this story was that people were, in effect, weeded out or weeded up on the basis of contributions in terms of being told, give above, I think the figure was, what, $30,000, and you get to meet with the president. How was that
Oh,
done?
no, it was much more than that.
Oh, more than that. I'm sorry.
Yes, it was... I think you're referring to the initial contribution, which was solicited for the January 30th meeting, which was held in the White House, and it was a meeting to launch the Central American Freedom Program, which was the educational and informational campaign to support the president's policies in Central America. We were required as fundraisers to solicit a minimum of $30,000 from contributors, and that these contributors would be part of a finance committee, if you will, to launch the Central American Freedom Program and would meet with President Reagan. But for contributors to meet privately with President Reagan, they would have to give a considerably more, at least $250,000.
And people actually did that?
Yes, none of my contributors gave that in excess of $200,000, and therefore, to the best of my knowledge, none of my contributors met privately with President Reagan. However, I do know that other contributors did meet privately with the president.
Well, in fact, I would think that, you know, over at the offices, if some guy actually coughed up or some woman actually coughed up $200,000, $250,000, that would be the cause for some celebration, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, you would know about it, right? I mean, I assume that wouldn't be kept a secret.
No, it wasn't kept a secret.
No. And they met with the president, and what would the president be told? Or what would they be told? They were being told what? The president just wanted to give them a pat on the head and say, thanks very much for giving the money, or?
I don't know, because they weren't my contributors. So I wasn't a part of that aspect of the work that the organization was doing.
But it is, I mean, you are not just speculating, it is a fact that some people actually met privately with the President of the United States because they gave money to the cause of the Contras.
Because they gave money to the cause of the president's policies in Central America, whether the Toys contributors were the only ones who met privately with President Reagan, I don't know that.
No, but I mean, it's really irrelevant, I think, whether all of them were Toys contributor or only 2 or 3 of them, but some Toys contributors, in other words, people who gave money for the specific purpose of buying weapons to send to the Contras, met privately with the President of the United States.
Yes.
And they had been told that their money would be used for the purchase of weapons.
I don't know what they were told. I can only tell you what I told my contributors. And I was given very specific instructions not to solicit funds for the purpose of buying materiel. We were never to come out and directly state that, not verbally and not in written form.
What happened if somebody asked you?
Well, I'll give you an example.
I'll tell you what. Give me a spiel. I'm one of your potential contributors. What would you say to me?
I would tell you that I would set the stage with you in terms of determining whether you were the kind of American who was frustrated that Congress had not acted to support a freedom fighter movement in Nicaragua, and you wanted to participate in something that would take more direct action with regard to that. And for instance, there were two military briefings which I attended. One was on March 27th and one was on April 16th. And I had a contributor come to the briefing on March 27th who seemed to be very concerned with what was happening in Central America, with the amount of Soviet military power coming into Nicaragua via Cuba and Eastern Bloc nations, etc., and very concerned that we weren't taking a more active position in supporting a liberation movement for the peoples of Nicaragua. After all, it's fact that they have had a Marxist regime forced on them militarily. And these people were the kinds of people who would be invited to these military briefings. And it was almost as if we utilized Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North to lend credibility to the implication of what we were doing. In other words, we didn't have to come out and say what we were doing. These people were so pumped up and so ready to take action that all they needed was to really meet with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and not even be told, but just have it be implied that we were the organization working directly on behalf of the President and his policies in Central America to provide the necessary help that the freedom fighters need in combating communism in Central America.
Tell you what, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by ABC News political director Hal Bruno, who has been coordinating ABC's investigative reporting of the Iran-Contra affair.
The Van Patten family loves their cars.
And they trust us to take care of them.
Every 3,000 miles, we bring them to Jiffy Lube. They change the oil with Pennzoil, replace the filter, lube the chassis, fill the important fluids.
Check the air filter and wiper blades. Inflate the tires. Vacuum the interior.
And wash the windows.
14 quality services in 10 minutes and with no appointment.
Welcome to Jiffy Lube. We'll take care of you like family.
Nothing could be finer than the taste of Aunt Jemima.
Great to have the folks visit, especially since they've never tried Aunt Jemima Light syrup before. They won't think much of half the calories. But when it pours so thick, too thick to be light, Dad won't believe his eyes. Mom will read the label. They'll both lose their manners. And tomorrow, I'll give them Butter Light.
Aunt Jemima Light and buttery flavored Butter Light. Both too thick to be light.
In the morning.
Oh, hi, Vern. I was just checking to see if you had plenty of those Purity ice cream treats. Yeah, it looks like you do. See, you got those thick ice cream sandwiches made with Purity premium homemade brand vanilla, and got your ice cream bars, and got your crunchy bars, and got your 12-packs. And you got the sweetest treat of all, Vern. The one that reminds me of you, the Nutty Buddy.
Drug and alcohol abuse is ruining lives, robbing young people of their futures and destroying families. WKRN Channel 2, in cooperation with the Alcohol and Drug Council of Middle Tennessee, is working to build awareness for the problem of alcohol and drug abuse in our area. Please support Project Addiction. It could save your life or the life of someone you love.
The Black Orchid on Magnum.
Someone is trying to kill me, and I'm terrified.
A beautiful woman hires Thomas to help her live her fantasies.
My hero.
But the players get carried away.
Somebody poisoned her.
And the fantasy becomes real.
Would risk anything to keep the game going, and you know it.
Thomas is caught in the middle when the mind games turn to murder on Magnum.
Thursday at 4 on Nashville's Channel 2.
Thursday, Olympic athlete Tom Waddell. Even as he battles AIDS, he's destroying stereotypes about gay men.
Watch 2020.
Thursday.
Charlie Gibson blushes when he reads his mail. He's warm, a winner. Say good morning to Charlie Gibson and Joan London. Weekdays on Good Morning America.
We are back once again with Jane McLaughlin and, of course, also Congressman Beryl Anthony, with whom I've not yet spoken, but with us now live from Santa Fe, New Mexico, is ABC News political director Hal Bruno. Congressman, I want to go to you first. Explain to me, explain to our audience, we've heard some fascinating material now from Ms. McLaughlin. Why do we care? Why is that important? Why is it illegal?
Well, it's illegal, number one, because the taxpayer that they were encouraging to contribute to this foundation is a 501c3 organization. That contribution is tax deductible. That means the Treasury is subsidizing the arms sales in violation of what the Congress said should be done. This cast a black eye over all charitable contributions that are abiding by the law, so it is something that all charitable contributions or charitable foundations should be interested in. People who make those contributions now can be audited by the IRS. Those contributions can be thrown out and they can be charged with penalties and interest. So it is a very serious matter from a tax law standpoint. You're also talking about taking a tax-exempt organization and violating national policy. I filed a complaint saying that they were taking tax-exempt money and violating the federal election campaign laws to try to influence who the voters would elect in November of 1986 in violation of the law.
You have now raised another issue that we haven't touched on yet. Just very briefly, sketch that out for me. They used money that was contributed to them and did what with it?
Well, they would solicit monies into the 501c3, which is the National Endowment for the Preservation of Liberty. They would then take that money and in violation of the election law, they would buy campaign ads that would specifically mention Democratic candidates by name, and they would try to influence the voters to vote against those candidates. Those candidates were candidates that had voted against monies for the Contras and had also voted against SDI in violation of what they considered to be the wrong policy.
Now, doing that with money that was given to a charitable organization or an educational organization, money that was tax deductible, is against the law.
Yes, NEPL, that would be a charitable contribution that would be tax deductible. They then take that money and illegally divert it for campaign purposes. The $30,000 limit would be reduced to a $5,000 limit if it were under the election law. So they not only violate the tax law, but they also violate the election law.
Now, some of that money, as we've just heard, was more than $30,000. Apparently there were some contributors who gave a couple of $100,000, maybe even more than that.
Well, I say what's very disturbing to hear Jane say that is that it sure appears that people in the White House were trying to sell the influence and the prestige of coming in to see the president. And if the president was not advised sufficiently by his advisors, by his chief of staff, by his national security office, then there is a serious breach of integrity within the White House during that period of time. All Americans should be concerned about that.
All right, Hal Bruno, put this into some kind of a political context for me now. What's happened today is that Carl Channell has pleaded guilty of conspiracy. Judge says to him, conspiracy, you must have conspired with someone, and he names a couple of people. One of them, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Where else is this likely to lead?
Well, it leads to all kinds of places, Ted. This is a major crack in the dam. And what's going to start happening now is all the water is going to come pouring through, and we're going to learn more about the entire Iran-Contra affair than we ever knew before. This was only one phase of it. This was the private fundraising to carry out a foreign policy against the will of Congress, to use the President of the United States and the White House almost as shills to raise the money, to go beyond that. They used other parts of the government. Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams took part in these briefings and these sessions over at the Hay Adams Hotel. It was the privatization of foreign policy, and it was the misuse of money. There's also millions of dollars that are still unaccounted for. We know that some of the money from Channell's fundraising went into political campaigns, into campaigns to pressure Congress. We know some of the money went through Richard Miller's organization, eventually to Swiss bank accounts.
Who's Richard Miller?
Richard Miller was the president of IBC, which was supposedly the public relations firm. Our investigation indicated that what this was a gigantic laundry chute. Our investigation showed that $5 million in the course of about 14 months went from Spitz Channel to IBC and Rich Miller. And some of that is accounted for, but there's millions of dollars that are not yet accounted for. I wonder if Congressman Anthony can tell us anything about that money. That's important area for his committee to be into.
Congressman, very quickly, can you? And then we got to take a break.
We can't account for it, and certainly we have committees in Congress that are presently conducting investigations. The select committees will go public next month. I serve on an oversight subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. We've already held one public hearing on foundations. We hopefully will conduct more hearings in the future.
All right.
Gentlemen, I said one thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Hal, very quickly, please.
Out here at the Democratic National Committee meeting, there's a lot of smiling faces tonight when they look to the political future of this issue.
All right, I'll tell you what, when we come back, I want to talk to Jane McLaughlin again for a couple of minutes. We'll continue in a moment.
The stars are gonna twinkle and shine. How they'll shine this evening about 8:45. I know I won't be late, cause at 8:30 I'm gonna hurry there. I'll be waiting where
They say time is what you make it. At Citizen, we prefer making it beautiful.
about 8:45.
Citizen.
Would you like to have something sweet?
Something nice and cold, without a lot of calories. Something with NutraSweet.
Taking my treat.
Come on. You're young. You got your health. Your whole life's ahead of you. And your contract's not up.
NutraSweet brand sweetener. Just look for the swirl.
Moving 200,000 families a year is a big responsibility, one we take very seriously at United Van Line. It's all part of United's commitment to excellence. And the quality shows in every move we make.
China's personal copiers come in 4 colors and copy in 5.
Red's your color.
And this replaceable cartridge makes them simple, even for you.
Lighten up, Jack.
They are light. Here.
What a guy.
Personal copiers for every personality.
Mom's magic meatloaf is weighing on you like a ton of bricks. Send the bubbles of Alka-Seltzer to the rescue, because speed is what you need to lift the heaviness off your stomach and relieve your heartburn and pounding headache fast. So for fast relief, let the bubbles rise to the occasion.
Alka-Seltzer to the rescue.
Try new extra strength Alka-Seltzer. More of what you take Alka-Seltzer for.
Back once again with Jane McLaughlin. Ms. McLaughlin, it's literally none of my business, and you can tell me so if you want to, but did you join that organization in the first place because of ideology or because you were looking for a job?
I joined because of ideology. I mean, and also I was looking for a job, but this was a place where I believed I could fight for 2 areas in which I believe very passionately. I'm very supportive of addressing the issue of the spreading of communism in Central America much more actively and consistently than we've been. And I'm very supportive of a strategic defense system.
All right, tell me now, if people say to me later on, or say to you when they see you on the street tomorrow, all right, you believed all those things, why are you talking now? Why were you talking a couple of months ago? To save your own skin or because you believe something went wrong? What do you tell them?
No, I believe something went wrong, and I knew as far back as November, but it wasn't until Colonel North was fired that I realized that I would have to do something with the knowledge that I had acquired, that all hell was going to break loose.
I'll tell you what, I want to pause just 1 second to warn our affiliates that we're going to go on for a few minutes beyond our normally scheduled time, and I just wanted to take that break because now I want to ask you the question that I guess is the only natural follow-up. What do you think went wrong? What was it that went wrong to you? You believed at one point that supporting the Contras was the right thing. Congress wasn't going to do it. The administration was clearly hinting in the broadest terms that private organizations ought to do it. And here comes this private organization, and they're just rounding up the money, and they've got all kinds of cooperation from some of the most influential people in this government. What made you then finally think that something had gone wrong?
Well, while I still support very strongly the liberation of Nicaragua, all that has happened recently reconfirms for me that the best way for us to formulate and implement a foreign policy is with the blessing of Congress and the blessing of the American people. because this just has crippled the administration, it has embarrassed the president, and it has damaged the cause, perhaps irreparably. And I don't know if we're going to be able to pick up the pieces and carry on. I mean, there are a lot of people that I think are looking at this as a way to gain political brownie points. And there's a much deeper issue here. There's a serious problem in Central America, and it's too close to home for us to ignore.
How much money do you know was raised by this group, and were there in fact similar groups, kind of companion groups, that you were at least peripherally aware of?
I don't know exactly how much money was raised by the organization. Spitz would often quote numbers, several $1 million. I think that the highest dollar amount was $8 million. I do know, because of the documents that I had acquired, that close to $5 million had been funneled from the 2 bank accounts to IBC. And
that's what Hal Bruno referred to a moment
yes,
ago as going down the laundry chute, right?
Exactly.
That's where it was cleaned, laundered.
I was looking, when I acquired the documents, I was trying to find out where all the money was going, because I didn't believe it was going for its intended purpose, or rather what I believed I was raising the money for, and I still don't. I don't believe any of the money, certainly not $5 million, ever reached the troops in Central America.
Where do you think it went? To whom do you think it went?
I don't know.
Well, I know, neither do I, but I mean,
I wish we knew.
You're in a better position to have suspicions than I am. I mean, you think some of the money just stuck to sticky fingers?
I don't know, Ted, I really don't. I suppose I could speculate, but I'm not even going to do that.
Well, you know, you have some thoughts, obviously, about the people you worked with, and I'd at least like you to give me your sense of the folks like Carl Channell. It is possible, although he today has pleaded guilty to a criminal charge, that you still regard him as fundamentally an honest human being, as someone who perhaps was misguided or who went in the wrong direction. Is he the kind of person, or were the people around him the kind of people who might have been doing this for money? In other words, for themselves?
I think that's quite possible. One need only refer to the diagram that came out in the Tower Commission report to see how many organizations and how many intermediaries were involved in all of this. I mean, God only knows how much money was pocketed along the way.
And nobody at the White House ever caught on? Nobody at the White House ever tracked any of this money? I mean, you know, here you had all kinds of folks from the White House and the State Department involved in this, the president himself involved in this, and nobody knew where the money was going?
It's a little crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot crazy. I mean, you know, here is this desperate situation where briefings are being given, presumably, and I mean, you haven't spelled it out, but presumably those briefings were telling these contributors how rough a situation it was in Central America and Nicaragua, how badly the Contras needed the money. So in comes the money, and nobody is paying any attention to where the money's going?
Well, I think the contributors believed, as I believed, that they were helping, that they were taking action to support those fighting for freedom and democracy in Central America. I don't think that anyone ever questioned, based on the credibility that was apparent via the connection with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, and Spitz clearly giving the impression that he was very closely tied to the president. That certainly was not the case.
What was not the case? He wasn't
close to
the...
That he was not closely tied to the president.
So
I think he touted that more than anything.
But apparently he was able to get in to see the president and to bring some of these folk along with him, right?
I think he had enough contacts, either on the inside, through perhaps Colonel North, or on the outside, working with consultants who had been very close to the president. And they were very helpful in gaining him the access that he needed. But perhaps I'm being naive in making this statement, but I really do not believe that the president was ever completely briefed on why he was meeting with these contributors and this organization, other than he was told that this was a conservative organization doing a lot of television ads on behalf of your policies in Central America. But I don't think that he knew what the Toys Project was all about and what they were really doing.
All right, I could go on talking to you for a long time, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk as this story develops even further. I'm very grateful to you for coming in. Thank you, Jane McLaughlin. Thank you, Congressman Anthony, and thank you, Hal Bruno. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been ABC News Nightline. If you wish a printed transcript of this or any Nightline broadcast, please send $3 to Nightline Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038. Nightline is a presentation of ABC News.
Friday, Webster struts his stuff. Then,
let's play some cards.
It's a full house with Susan Anton, Dr. Joyce Brothers, Edwin Newman, Bubba Smith, and Tony Danza.
Hey, guys. Sorry I'm late.
Mr. Belvedere returns, followed by Goldfinger.
Friday,